Like, share, subscribe, hit the super chat on the way in. Um, so we are going to be speaking of a Mr. Army Osei Frimpong. Yes, Mr. Funky Academic himself. Shout out to Funky Academic. I've been listening to Funky Academic for forever. No, for years. It hasn't been more than 5 years now. It definitely feels as much. Um, yeah, actually more than that. Yeah, something along those lines. I've been listening to Army um since he was on Yvette's show, and when he before he even went solo, I subscribed to his own personal channel. So yes, the brother is smart as a whip. He's just, you know, disagree with him, agree with him, you're gonna have a problem pushing back, because he's just really that good. If I'm not mistaken, he is working on his PhD in philosophy, I think, right? So shout out to Army Osei Frimpong, the Funky Academic. He has great interviews with Soccer and Crystal Ball, Soccer and Crystal Ball. He has really good interviews with them on the breakdown now, also, or breaking points. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said the breakdown. Sorry, ladies from the breakdown. From breaking points. Actually, the ladies from the breakdown might want to try to get him on. Um, yeah, he's just really good. Really, really smart brother. Okay, now, um, Army spoke about the red pill, and shout out to him for that. Um, he did a really good job, I think, on assessing certain things, but there was a couple of things that stood out to me, namely, right? Let me make sure I get my notes ready. Right? Signaling class aspiration, right? So signaling class aspiration. And let me make sure I say that one more time. Signaling class aspiration. So Army speaks about women. I think he's speaking specifically about women of color, black women in this case, um, who refer themselves as feminists first, or they're feminist minded, um, and how in many ways what they're doing is signaling class aspiration. If they see themselves as feminists first, or women first, if I'm not mistaken, um, before they're black, right? And Army actually has a really good um, angle at which he is critiquing and speaking about women actually not being women the same, because what being a woman has meant traditionally in American society, and for white women to be stay-at-home wives, white women, black women couldn't be, right? Let's say that again. For white women to be traditional stay-at-home wives, black women couldn't be, right? So what bolstered much of the ideas of these stay-at-home wives in American society is black women doing the homework, the literally at the home for white women, right? So that's very important. And Jules actually spoke to a lot of this also, right? Um, but the signaling of class aspiration, I wanted to give the Funky Academic something to think about. That's the whole point. And shout out to you, Army. I'm gonna be referring to Army interchangeably as the Funky Academic and Army. But yeah, that's the whole point, Army. Right? Like, if you listen to some of these people speak, if you listen to Kim Foster speak, and you listen to her aversion to blue collar men, as a Harvard alum, or at least a person that attended Harvard at one point, if you listen to Chrissy speak, the colorist queen herself, you listen to her aspiration, and these are women that are coming to different types of feminist ideology from different angles, right? But a lot of it is class aspiration, right? If you listen to Paris speak and you listen to Yanni speak, you hear elitist a-holes, right? You listen to Lexus Exodus speak, you hear elitist. They are aspiring for a particular brand of white womanhood, which brings me back to patting myself on the back and actually taking much of what BGS says about myth of white womanhood and pretty much saying, yeah, that's what it's about. So, you know, Army, when you say these things, when you say that, you're actually absolutely right. But it's not just a hardcore card carrying black feminists. It's many black women aspire to upper middle class and rich white women's lifestyle, right? So they are signaling class aspiration when they see themselves as either women first or they see themselves as feminists first, right? They do want specifically college educated black women because we got to think about what they're being taught in these institutions and then how they then bring that into the black community, right? You know, the miseducation of a Negro is what I'm playing with, those type of concepts, right? And then they try to impose those particular concepts on the black community as if we're a one-to-one comparison example of white society in America, right? The class signaling is much of what these people are engaging in. They've always actually been engaging in that. And once again, remember the Chrissy and Real Talk with Yanni and Paris Milan do not occupy the exact same lane as Kim from Fort Harriet, Kim Foster, but they come to much of the same conclusions though, because it really is about class aspiration, the myth of white womanhood. When you listen to Kim Foster speaks, when she the video that she made responding to the women that had an issue with her speaking about black women in luxury, not the original black women in luxury video, the second one with her responding to her critics. Listen to how she was speaking. She turned on the white woman scent. She was being extra sassy. She was being kind of catty, but she was hearkening to a certain brand of white femininity, class, and her aversion to being with a blue collar person, which, by the way, Mr. Z is, and I have been playing with the thought of, does Mr. Z have an issue with that because I'm blue collar? And I don't think it really is, but I think it's very interesting how many white collar women who are not on Kim from Fort Harriet's level think like her and really can't afford to think like her, right? So they have, in other words, they're white collar, but they're not high ranking white collar in whatsoever, right? So that's what makes that conversation very interesting, right? Yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. Traffic and non-driving people, bro. People, oh my God. Oh, you gotta love it. You gotta love it. Okay, a world. What did Army say here? Okay, so Army Ose Frimpong also speaks about a world remade by reason and how this kind of um, determinism that we kind of push in much of the red pill spaces, female determinism, male determinism, which is like this kind of like a woman does this and these are her roles, right? Her gender determinism, like, and a man does this and this is his roles. And much of what the red pill is responding to are the women that have been speaking like this and playing both and over the past 40, 50 years in this conversation. We're responding to the Oprahs in many ways, Army, right? And I mention this often, and I actually, this is what I was saying to FD Signifier, which is they want to be I am woman, hear me roar, while being damsel in distress at the same time, right? Or switch between the two at any given second, not even any given minute, any given second. They want to be able to switch between I am woman, hear me roar, and damsel in distress, right? So this is how you get strong, independent women. I don't need no man. And the reason why my life sucks so much is because I don't have a man and I can barely wipe my own rear end without one. Right? And Army, you are correct about this essentially being them infantilizing themselves, and many men who buy into this also playing into this and helping some of these women infantilize themselves, and the men also infantilizing these women. Yes, you're correct. You obviously, I don't think I need to tell you you're correct. You're right, clearly, right? But that exists for a reason. Much of what you're seeing in the red pill spaces is, well, fine. If you want, and it is, although many men are speaking on this topic, and much of this are men responding to the women that say, well, I can't be feminine. And let's be clear what many women are saying when they say feminine. We've never actually delved into that. Much of what women are saying when they say feminine, men are hearing something else. What women are saying is, I can be nice and kind and not rude and not shrewd and not mean, right? That's what they mean by feminine. I can't be that. I cannot not be an asshole. I gotta be an a-hole, right? Because you, Mr. Man, Mr. Black man, and Mr. Black men haven't put me in the position to be a upper middle class or rich or wealthy white woman. And because I am not a rich or wealthy, at the worst, upper middle class white woman, that means that I can excuse my bad behavior. I can excuse being crass and mean and rough and tough and angry and an a-hole and all of that, right? I'm all of that because you, as an individual black man, and black men as a group, haven't made me and other black women upper middle class at worst and wealthy at best white women. So these people don't, and I say this oftentimes, they don't see the Roseanne type figures that they work with, the Roseanne type white women that they work with. They speak as if all white women are Real Housewives of Orange County bred white women. This is how you get much of that, what have black men built? What have black men conquered? Type of conversation, right? We're going to segue into the institutional speak in a minute, but we're speaking about more intimate relationships between individual black man and individual black woman, but also black men and black women as groups, and why some of these black women online speak the way they do, and what Army is hearing when he hears black men respond a certain way or speak a certain way. I want to make sure that he knows that much of what he's hearing is black men responding to decades of a certain type of rhetoric coming from black women, right? But definitely over the past 2 or so decades, a particular type of rhetoric coming from black women online, right? So I want to make sure that he knows that that is what black men in the red pill space, what they're responding to, right? And much of it is very, very one-to-one transactional. To be 100% honest, and I know I'm kind of going through a dead zone right now, so bear with me. I'll say what I just said again right now. Yes, much of what we're speaking about is one-to-one transactional, and you know, Army is older than me, much older than me. I will say this, Army, you have to remember that the way many of these women have been speaking about black men in the black community is that not only have black men not been carrying their weight, black women carry everything in the black community, and black men are the children. They are dunces, they are ineffectual, they are just horrible. I'll say to Army, maybe he didn't hear it, what I said to FD Signifier. Remember, black boys are socialized that they are both defective white men and defective black women simultaneously. Meaning they will not have the power, the prestige, the resources of white men, and they won't have the moral center, the morality, the humanity of black women, right? So they're just horrible. And I say that to say what you hear from black men is a pushing back of that, right? That's why much of the black men in the red pill space sound the way they do, because they've been literally hearing this since they've been children. This is much of where you get the black men ain't ish type of rhetoric. That's what I'm playing with when I'm speaking about this, right? Very important. Very important that we respond to Army with what I just said, right? And y'all like, share, subscribe, hit the super chat, right? Army also kind of speaks on proxy violence, and how we exhibit violence in a kind of advanced society is not as much brutish, physical abuse. It's more institutional abuse, and how one can weaponize the institutions against another. Well, that's the whole point. That's many women bragging about the court system and what they can do with the court system against men, right? That's them playing with the concept of damsel in distress, right? That is with them. That is certain women weaponizing the family court system, child support court system against men, right? So that I mean, I really am not telling Army anything he doesn't already know, right? But I just thought it was needed to like be very blatant about this. But yeah, weaponizing the institutions against their male counterparts, their fathers, right? But this is not only on a personal level, this is also our system somewhat infantilizing women because we don't know how to hold women accountable without being sexist pigs. So women knowing that and then weaponizing white women tears, and for black women trying to weaponize white women tears, which is black women crying like they're white women, the crocodile tears essentially is what Mr. Z is speaking on, against men. But because for the most part, and this is what Army is 100% correct on, for the most part, black women aren't seen as women in the same way white women are. Black women can really only weaponize white women tears, the crocodile tears, against black men. That's the one group of people white society will give them a pass on weaponizing those tears against, and black women know it. And they use it, right? And they use it. So it's important that we speak on, because this is where we get the, well, my daddy wasn't part of my life conversation, particularly from black women, right? I didn't have a dad in my life. Ma'am, you just rolled over like 10 people with this car and you kept your foot on the gas. Wait, is that your ex-boyfriend under that driver's side, front wheel? Well, I didn't have a dad in my life. There you go. This is where we get the whole concept of daddy issues, right? And women playing into that, right? It's weaponizing much of the kind of tropes that go around in our society, weaponizing them and making it seem like those are like real, right? And thanks for the super chat, Big Kev. And Big Kev said they endorse effery by infantilizing women. Much of our society does. Much of our society does. Women infantilize other women. Men infantilize women. The institutions infantilize women. And when I say the institutions, I'm talking about everywhere from the education system all the way to the family infantilizes women. I would like to direct y'all to the Average at Best video with Kevin Samuels and that young lady. And what were all the women responding said? Look how he talking to that girl. Why is he going at that girl the same way? Look at how Rebecca Lynn Pope was in an uproar and was referring to this grown woman who at the time, well, she's still older than Mr. Z, right? So Big Kev is 100% right. about the infantilizing of women. And so when you hear the red pill space reacting or responding a particular way, we're responding in many ways to that, to say, well, if you want us to infantilize these women also, if you want us to play that game, then these are our rules. At least for Mr. Z and maybe the space I occupy, I'm not about dictating to women what they should and shouldn't be. I'm saying, well, if you want this particular outcome, or if you want men like this in your intimate personal lives, then these particular men want a particular woman. Now, if we're going to do that societally, if you want to play damsel, and that includes black women, if you want to play damsel in distress and be soft life and soft era black woman on a societal level, then it's going to probably require this type of thought process coming from you as a woman and coming from women as a group. That is softer and more amenable to men, right? And Indigo Flow Genius comment says selective slash situational infantilization. Of course, they do want it both and, right? They do want it both and. You know, and continuing, Army speaks about biological determinism. Um, you know, and I think that was really, really, really good, right? And accountability, right? So accountability or the lack thereof in biological determinism, right? And how, you know, we're getting more and more data that single fathers make better, well, for single parents, single fathers make better parents than single mothers. Um, and Army does speak about the resource gap, and how much resources those men probably have more than their women. But Army does it, you know, concede or make the point that, well, if you were raised to be accountable and responsible, then, and I'm paraphrasing and I'm actually putting some words in his mouth, but if you were raised to be accountable and responsible, then you're probably going to raise your children that way, right? And so you're probably going to raise better children, right? And so with all that talk of women speaking about accountability, them being forced to raise the children, but they don't have any real sense of responsibility. They don't raise those children to have any sense of responsibility, and then you get wayward children when those children become adults, right? It's not a sense of responsibility if somebody has to stand over you to make you do. The responsibility is you doing without someone making you do. You know, like Mr. Z is driving to work right now, and no one's making me drive to work right now. I woke up to go to work because that's part of the responsibility of being a worker, is working and going to work without somebody waking you up, right? And making you do, right? Babe, I can't read your comment because you ain't put no money on it. uh Shout out to Mrs. Z. Happy Valentine's Day, which I already told her in person, but happy Valentine's Day. Right? So speaking on the conventional gender roles, now this is the sore spot for everyone. This is the sore spot for men and for women, the conventional gender roles. I think what we find, and I think I would like for Army to play with this notion a little bit. Much of the reason why you see the marriage decline and the divorce rate higher for poorer people than richer people, and the fact and the reason why oftentimes train tracks, oftentimes it's the women that file for divorce. It's because the women also are hard up on the gender roles. See, we've been critiquing the men for decades, saying essentially, hey, don't be jealous of the women in their newfound positions in corporate America. Don't be jealous of the women in their rising in ranks in these schools and universities. Don't be jealous of the women and their newfound societal power and influence because of said rise in education and you know being the face of certain institutions. Don't be jealous. Don't be jealous. Don't be jealous. Right? And in many ways, we've socialized the men to be a bit more egalitarian than the women. And so you get women who are hard up on the gender roles who say, oh yeah, I can't be with no man. I make more than. Well, I'm going overtly saying this. I'm not joking, Army, on this one. Overtly saying, yeah, if I make more money than him, I will mistreat him. I I have the video in my history right now where the woman says that. Right? I have the video where the woman says that. So it's important that when we speak about these gender roles, I'm not saying Army is doing this, but it's important that we stress it's not only the men because over the past few decades we have been speaking like it's the men that are hard up on these gender roles. No, the women actually don't want egalitarian. They want both and. They want to speak egalitarian while having a large net of worker bee men that will do for them. They don't actually want 50-50. They don't actually want equal distribution of the responsibility of maintaining and creating the institutions in the first place. They don't want that. They want to manage the institutions after the fact. They want to be the faces of the institutions after the fact. They want to throw their power and influence in the faces of working class, middle class, and lower middle class and poor men after the fact while they aspire to be with the men at the top, right? But maintaining and creating institutions, oh no. And if you let women speak long enough, particularly the women that we're speaking of, they're going to show you that and tell you that, quite frankly. Right? So the biological determinism and gender roles, it's not that's not exclusive to the men in the red pill space, right? The way we speak about these things and the way we because I would like to direct you. I always say the divestors because how blatant they are. The reason why I direct people to the divestors is because of how blatant they are with their rhetoric. They're not the only women that think this, feel this, and actually say these type of things. But because of how blatant they are and how overt they are, they're really the best to use as an example of what many women are thinking, feeling, and saying, right? And they want the gender roles. I mean, who is it? Liz Marie Ann or who, I can't remember the name of the woman that me and BGS and Art of Immore speak of all the time, who straight up said like, you know, women want these corner office jobs and they want these positions and they want these kick-ass positions in corporate America, but they jump off the train once you tell them, by the way, you might have to be the primary breadwinner. Yeah, the whole power couple thing, yeah, that's not a thing in mass like that. Somebody's gonna have to be the primary caregiver of the children. And if you want these positions, then your husband and your boyfriend and your man is going to have to be in the other role, play that other supporting role, and that's where the women jump off. So we're not speaking about men being insecure about their role and their position. We're speaking about women being insecure about their role and their position when they have to be that primary breadwinner. So when we speak about biological determinism or when we speak about the gender roles, I think we have a hard time dealing with women feeling insecure with playing these roles. Not the men. We talk about the men so much. Oh, he feels a certain way because his wife makes more, or they got divorced because he feels a certain way because his wife made more, or they broke up because his girlfriend made more, or he felt insecure because she's more educated than him. And no, right? And I would like to direct y'all. There's a episode of Divorce Court, and I don't know how real Divorce Court is, so let me preface my statement by saying this, where a very well-spoken, educated, kind of heavy-set black woman was in a relationship with a former neo-Nazi skinhead type white dude, straight up. And this is something they both admitted. She had 2 kids from the dude. She had 2 kids from the dude. But he was so horrible of a man, that's why they were breaking up. That's why she couldn't do it anymore. Why is Mr. Z bringing that up as an example? To say, if a woman want to make it work, she'll make it work. Because they had been together for some time. It's because she valued his white skin. So it didn't matter that she was more educated than him. It didn't matter because he himself, the white dude, said she would use certain words and I would be like, you know, kind of dumbfounded. So it started off as some, y'all already know, right? Borderline Sally Hemings type thing. Well, can't use that because he actually had money and he was a president, right? And then it turned into an actual relationship. But because she valued his white skin, it didn't matter that she was just way more educated than him, way smarter than him, way more accomplished than him. It didn't matter, right? But in the black community, because many black women have aspirations of white womanhood, they don't value black men in the same way. So when they do get their education, that's college and university, they just don't see the men the same way. So when we speak about gender roles and biological determinism, I would like us to have a both and conversation about how the women play into these roles, and in the red pill space, the men responding to the women playing in these roles. Side note, this is why Mr. Z speaks of and speaks about Kim from For Harriet so much, because she's trying to play both and, right? And thank you, Black Uru. Black Uru says, and thank you for the super chat. Black Uru says, women realize gender roles mean men do everything. And I think that's really what they're attempting to say, right? So, you know, let me go to the next point. What else we got? Responsibility for maintaining the institutions, right? Institutional responsibility. Now, this is where it gets real interesting in the black community, because you let black women tell it, and they holding down the black community by themselves. They're holding up the sky by themselves in the black community. You let certain black women tell it. Black men are nowhere to be found, and if they are, it's gendered or sexual. It's dependent on sexuality. So they'll maybe tacitly say something about LGBTQ men, but straight black men, oh no, you let certain black women tell it. Straight black men are nowhere to be found in the black community. They're not doing none of their part, right? Meanwhile, these people that swear that they're holding up the sky in the black community, we already know what they're like in their workspaces. So how is that possible? It's the same type of personality traits that would get you from point A to point B. So you're doing all the work in the black community to hold the black community up, but somehow you suck at your job, right? How is that possible? Right. And you say you're holding up the sky, but yet we have teachers in the black community, black women teachers, whose sons, their own sons can't read. We have professional black women. Y'all know Mr. Z gonna bring this up as an example, right? We had this conversation a couple years ago. Watch this. You have professional black women, air quotes, accidentally killing their sons. Ooh, Mr. Z, did you bring that up? Yeah, Mr. Z did. So you were able to go to high school, college, get your master's or your PhD, get into whatever political or corporate environment, rise up the ranks, be a notable name in your environment, and yet you can't discipline your son without accidentally killing him. Yikes. Right? We have to have a real conversation about why the red pill space exists, how the red pill, what the red pill space is responding to, because they're telling you, they're screaming it. The men in the black manosphere and the black red pill space are screaming to you what they're responding to decades of black men ain't ish rhetoric coming from both academia, coming from the media, coming from black media, right? Coming from the church, coming from all these institutions, both in and out of the black community. So the men are just not howling at the moon. They're responding to much of the language that's been going on in the black community for decades, centuries, decades. Right. And much of the conversation of gender roles coming from men, and you'll hear men say this. Mr. Z has said this himself. Egalitarian, all this egalitarian talk in the black community is a facade. The women don't actually want egalitarian. They want to talk egalitarian and have on and off switch for the patriarchy. Because what they're showing you more and more is that I might want to have sex with the dude that makes less money than me. I might find him charismatic and all that other good stuff. But being in a relationship with a man that makes significantly more than me, I can't do. That's on an individual level. On a societal level or on a community level, I can't respect the men that earn less than me. Why are they talking? This is where you start getting into dangerous territory with some of the implied, suggested, and sometimes just outright overtly said talk of aborting black male sons and aborting black boys. Right? That's where you get into that dangerous territory. Because they're telling you that if you are not going to be upper middle class at worst to wealthy at best, and like at an ostentatious level of wealth at best type of black man, then why do you even exist? If you're not going to do for black women, then why do you even exist on a societal institutional level? Right. And it's important that as I respond to Army's video that I say these things in this very kind of blatant way, very explicitly, right? So, and this is I'm kind of trafficking in some of the rhetoric of Sarge Willie Pete. The women don't want to maintain the institutions, Army. They don't. Like I said, they want to manage it. They want to be the face of them, but they don't want to maintain or build any of the No, not at all. Right? They don't want to deal with the stress. And quite frankly, for black women in specific, too many aspire to be white women, a particular type of brand of white women, not the everyday working class white women that most white women are. No, upper middle class at worst white women. And so in that case, they don't want to control any of the institutions. No, they might want to control the institutions while you maintain it, right? Be the managers of the institutions while you after you built it and while you maintain it. Outside of the home, yeah, no. So it's important that shout out once again to Army Ose Frimpong. Once again, this brother, just I always admired Army's intelligence, and the certain angle that he comes at things from. Same thing. That's how I think about Dr. Green Gorilla. There's something about black philosophers in particular that I've always, gravitated to. Not you too, better you. I hope Ms. Z is still listening. And better you says, better you said, go finish the degree, bro. We need your perspective. Right. And thank you for that, better you. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you. Because it's important, and like what you find in, and this is why Passport Bros is very interesting and important, is what you find is much of Passport Bros are going to darker places around the planet. This is something that we already spoke about. I'm bringing this into the conversation for a reason. I'm not going too far off on a tangent. It's because Passport Bros are showing you they want melanated women, primarily black women. That's why they're going to the Dominican Republic. That's why they're going to Brazil. That's why they're going to Africa. And they're not going to North Africa either. They're going to Sub-Sahara Africa. Zulu, Dr. Ron O'Neill are going to the darkest parts of Africa. They're dealing with black women. And these men are also going to Southeast Asia. Not East Asia, not South Asia, but Southeast Asia. So they're not going to the colorist parts of South Asia, and they're not going to the damn near white East Asians. They're going to the Cambodias and the Laoses, right? In the Philippines. Those type of countries. Because they want melanated women. And why that's important to say here is to say black men are not trying to run from their responsibility in the black community as much as we've been implying that, suggesting that, and outright saying that over the past really since the plantation, but over the past 6 or so decades, 7. Right? I said it before, I'll say it again. If black men were trying to be as a group, we're trying to be a one-to-one perfect version of white men, just darker, then they would be Passport Bros would be going to Europe. And the vast majority of SYSBM black men in America would be attempting to date white women. That's not the case. Would be attempting to marry white women. That's not the case. Right? Give me a second, yo. Now, Army also speaks about, the Funky Academics also speaks about a world, what is it again? Let me make sure I say it the right way. A world remade by reason. Now, I really like this statement, right? And it speaks to, some of our concepts and some of the things that we say about going to a 1950s model relationship or some Regency era. Shout out to Karine for giving me that. Regency era, Victorian era, high society concept of women, right? Pretty much sitting at home back in Britain, back in France, back in Belgium, right? Back in Spain, back in Portugal, back in the Netherlands. All these European countries was on this, or a lot of them were, right? Sitting back home while your men go conquer, grape, and pillage the rest of the world, right? And these kind of notions have permeated even the black community. And so, in a world remade by reason, much of the way people are speaking as if we're still not even in that era, actually, kind of still back in the days of cavemen or something. And that includes the women. So, which is important, I have to say this again. What's being said, implied, suggested is that I can't be feminine, translation, I can't be nice and kind and attentive and caring because you don't make enough money, Mr. Black Man and Mr. Black Men. Your status in the society isn't high enough to warrant that type of behavior from me and from other black women. So yeah, the world may have been remade in logic, but the women are straight up telling you, yeah, no, I don't want it. I don't even see men as my equals in this society. I see them as lesser than me if they're not better than me. Ooh, put it in the book. And you see that. That's why I brought up the marriage rates earlier. And who's filing for divorce and why. And who's getting married. Shout out to Dr. Green Gorilla who read us those papers at in his video. Was it The End of the Family? The men and the women and the women and the women are both saying, yeah, we're not getting married because the man doesn't make enough. Right? So yeah, the world might have been remade in logic, but the women are telling you, yeah, if he's not better than me, then he's lesser than me. There is no equal. I may talk all it once again, all of this egalitarian talk, I don't mean it. My words will say egalitarian, my actions will say no. Right? So in a world remade in logic, it's real difficult to speak that way or act that way when the women also want to play the gender roles. And as a matter of fact, in many cases, they want to play gender roles more than the men, but they want to have an on and off switch for it, though. This is where you get them getting to skip out on the accountability part of the conversation and the responsibility part of the conversation. That's when they want to turn the switch off. This is when they want others to infantilize them. They call it. This is when they call it femininity. No, it's you want people to infantilize you. So Army did a, he spoke and he did critique the black manosphere. I don't think I mean, we were we were born in darkness. We're not beyond reproach. We are used to being critiqued, really being insulted, right? But the red pill space, it exists as a response. Particularly, I'm speaking of the black manosphere, the black red pill space. It exists as a response to decades of black men are not lifting their weight. Black men ain't ish. Black men are secretly gay. Black men are all of that type of talk. Black men are not carrying their weight in the black community. They're horrible fathers, horrible husbands, They're colorist on the level of neo-Nazis. They're shrewd, they're mean, they're abusive to the children and the women and the LGBTQ. So when you hear black men in the red pill spaces speaking, we have to remember the backdrop is that they're responding to decades of language that I just set out earlier. Right? And much of their response is, well, if you want this type of black man, then you need to be this type of black woman. It's not actually fighting, and this is, it's much of it, not all, much of it is not fighting to be egalitarian because the men know the women don't actually mean it. So what the men are saying is, well, if you want to be treated like that, you got to be like this. It's not, well, can we let's move forward and find a nice 50-50 balance. Half the women will tell you no outright. And out of the other half of those women will say yes and then flake on you later when times get hard. Because they really didn't mean the 50-50 talk. And the men know it. That's how you get much of the red pill space. That's how we get the gender role talk. Right. And I'll end out on this. Army speaks about the hard work of parenting. Right. Now Mr. Z isn't a parent, so this one, just I gotta be a little careful with. But if the black community, 70 some odd percent single mothers, and it kind of finds itself in this position, and the schism between the black men and black women has grown, and yet we keep on blaming this on the non-existent fathers, something wrong there. Black women have pretty much had unfettered access to socializing in the air quotes family, to socializing the boys and the girls for at least a good 60 years, 50 years. And yet when it's time to do the paperwork and the accountability work for how the Xers and millennials have turned out, all of a sudden we can't talk about responsibility and accountability no more because the father wasn't there, and the non-existent father is more responsible for this wayward adult than the present mother. That's all I can really say about that. Once again, because Mr. Z is not a parent, so I got to be careful traverse that. Right. Maybe this is why some of a certain cohort of women are speaking about aborting black male sons, right? Black males and black sons. Because what they're saying is, well, if I got to be responsible for this wayward child that I raised, and if I got to be held accountable for this wayward child that I raised, then I might as well not even have him. Yikes. Right? It's pretty ugly. Right? So, like I said, I was going to end out with that, but I wanted to bring it back to signaling class aspiration. This is where Army really, this was my bag. This is the part that I really appreciate. Much of the entire conversation about femininity, um, much of the conversation about feminism, much of the conversation about just women in education, in the workforce, is signaling class aspiration. That's the whole part of the conversation. They're going to hide it behind different things, right? Be coy about it, but it is about signaling class aspiration. What's beautiful about the internet is that the women are so loud about it now. They're not even implying it anymore. They're not even suggesting it. They're just explicitly, overtly, straight out saying it. I want this lifestyle. And you mix that with, y'all know, Mr. Z got to do the isms, the neoliberalism, the consumerism, and the materialism. And it's really, well, if you can't afford me this lifestyle, then screw everything you're saying. And that's on an individual level for many Black women, but also for a group, for the whole entire group. We want to be what we think upper middle class and rich white women are, what we feel they are, right? I hate you for this. Better you. Better use this. And excuse me. Better use this. It's cool. That was only the second closing. LOL. No, for real. I gotta get out of here. But yeah. So the signaling class that right there, and that's much of. As a matter of fact, we could tie this to the couple of videos that Mr. Z has made over the past week or so, speaking about women of color critiquing white supremacy while secretly wanting to be with white men. Right? Speaking about the patriarchy, speaking about men of color aspiring to be white patriarchs when secretly, really, shout out to the word projection, really it's the women that want a certain brand of manhood and masculinity, which they see only in white men. So it would reason that much of this talk of feminism is actually Black women aspiring for white femininity. And it's not just Black women, it's other women of color speaking this way also. Right? Much of this is class aspiration. Much of the attending college is class aspiration. Speaking a certain way, comporting yourself a certain way is class aspiration. Having certain ideals, or at least purporting to have certain ideals, is class aspiration. Now, what does that mean for the masses of Black people that are really pretty much lower middle class, working class, and poor? Well, that's where the eugenics talk comes in for many women. Black women in specific, but the divestors even more specifically. Right? That's where the Black men ain't ish talk comes in. That's where the Black men are not on my level talk comes in. That's where the Black men ain't trying hard enough talk comes in. That's where the where's my man? I did all of this work. I got this degree comes in. That's where the I can't be with no blue collar man. Shout out to Kim from Fort Harriet talk comes in. Right? It's not about the money. It's about the class. She actually did say it. There's no reason for me to use any other example. There you go. And it's understandable, she did attend Harvard. But I always use her as an example to say she's not the only one that sounds like that. And the other women that do can't afford to sound like that, think like that, feel like that. And the Black community can't afford for them to think like that, feel like that, and talk like that. Because that doesn't just stay an internal thought and feeling. It also reverberates out in the community because of the way they speak to and treat these particular blue collar men. Even though she's just a $45,000, $50,000, $30,000 white collar woman. She's a white collar woman aspiring to be a white woman. A lower middle class, white collar black woman aspiring to be an upper middle class or rich white woman. So much of that feminism talk is class aspiration. It is signaling a certain level of education, a certain level of socialization in a particular worldview. And I think we have to have a real conversation about, and I say, I'm going to really start banging the drums on this. I've said it before. How have women of color, particularly for black people, in the black community, how have black women internalized, excuse me, how have black women internalized much of the concepts of white supremacy, both educated black women and not, institutionally educated black women and not, because they're not above it either. Right? We have to have a real conversation about that. From the media to academia, how have these black women internalized concepts of masculinity, manhood, femininity, womanhood? What do they aspire to be? Right? What do they think about community? If they think about community, what do they think about money and class? All of that's important. We really haven't been doing much of that. What we've been doing is chastising the men. Right? So when Army speaks about signaling class aspirations, that's the first thing that came to Mr. Z's mind. Aspirational black women chastising black men for not being chocolate dipped upper middle class white men at worst. Right? And I'll pause right there. Y'all like, share, subscribe, hit the well, actually not hit the super chat. Mr. Z is about to close out. Like, share, subscribe. Go check out other Black Manosphere shows. Go check out other non-Black Manosphere shows, right? Because much of the reason why Army sounds the way he sounds is because he reads a whole lot, right? But it's important that we kind of start to get a handle on this. And as we go mainstream, shout out to BGS because he's 100% correct about this. As we go mainstream, people are going to be entering these spaces or trying to have conversations with us, right? And we need to be able to articulate why there is a Black manosphere, why there is a Black red pill space, right? And be ready for some serious pushback, right? Because the women wanted you to take the verbal abuse. They wanted you to take them insulting black men, belittling black men, comparing the masses of black men to the small sliver of elite white men and deeming black men not good enough. They want you to eat that. And what we need to be able to do is to articulate why there is a Black manosphere and a Black red pill space. And it's not just, well, y'all are just insecure because the women are doing better than you. You got mommy issues. Or they like to flip what Mr. Z says, you just mad because of who didn't find you attractive when you was in high school. We got to be prepared for those type of comments and talking points, the who hurt you talking points. And rhetoric, we have to be ready for that. And then respond with, and that's why there's a black red pill space. That's why there's a Black manosphere. You just exhibited it. Right? And on that note, for real. All right, Mr. Z out, y'all. Y'all have a great rest of y'all day. Like I said, go check out other Black manosphere shows and content. And go check out other non-Black manosphere shows and content. Love, peace, and chicken grease. And I will pause right there. So it was actually like 3 or 4 times this time, better you. I'm gonna try to work it down to like maybe 2 times. All right, y'all. Y'all have a great rest of y'all day.